Okay, I will do that. Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to have Mr. Sas Otto with us tonight. He's got a wealth of experience, not only as a teacher, but also as a headmaster. He's a trained mediator. He's passionate about restorative practices and obviously specifically what's happening in our youth environment. Sas, thank you so much for coming tonight and sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. It's always a privilege to hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I take it that you all can hear me clear. Good.
Yes.
Mediation and reconciliation is about a profound quest for justice and social transformation. But at the same time, it is about service, solidarity, and exploring and rediscovering the human spirit that has been lost or shattered through human conflict, cruelty, ignorance, and greed. This is a quote from a person with the name of Hiskias Asefa. I don't know who he is, but I believe what he says. Now, this paper, which I will present tonight, is an attempt to support the development of structured programs to manage conflict resolution in schools. I just want to put it a little harder. Research has revealed alarming increases in school violence over the last decade, and the statistics are disturbing and upsetting. Misconduct and disruptive behaviour critically impair effective curriculum delivery. How to deal with this problem is one of the most underestimated aspects of teacher training and is exacerbated by the relevant education laws not being specific on how to address it. It is clearly a pressing issue which needs urgent attention, hence this paper. In 2012, the Center for Justice and Crime Prevention conducted a national school violence study. The study revealed alarming increases in school violence, with 1 in 5 high school learners experiencing violence at school. Police statistics between April 2019 and March 2020 recorded 9 murders and 19 attempted murder as a result of bullying in schools. Crime statistics for 2022 revealed 83 rapes and 19 murders committed on the premises of educational facilities. Between March 2021 to April 2022, 90,073 girls aged between 10 and 19 gave birth. During the same period, there were 258 cases of assault or grievous bodily harm and 22 cases of attempted murder on educational premises. In 2022, the Department of Basic Education reported 411 gang-related incidents. With increasing rates of unemployment, poverty, and the pressures of COVID-19 on schools, one can only assume that conflict in schools has at best remained the same or worsened, as there have been no new approaches to deal with this issue. It has been revealed through research conducted by the South African Democratic Teachers Union, SATU, that teachers are facing pressure from learners who are undisciplined, and parents who do not acknowledge that their children have behavioral issues in the classroom when it comes to curriculum delivery. It was also revealed that learners' violent behavior is learned from the examples set at home and their communities. COVID-19 caused an increase in domestic violence in homes where families were left without incomes, leaving children extremely vulnerable. These issues affect their behavior, and when they return to school, they lash out. Satu has warned of the far-reaching consequences on the education system because of immense stress teachers are experiencing under the conditions to which they are exposed. The unacceptable behavior of learners has gone to the extent that teachers are threatened and in some cases even assaulted. Conflict in schools environments is a global phenomenon and a major problem. In the classroom, together with disruptive behavior, it negatively impacts on the teacher's ability to teach and the learner's ability to learn. The need for conflict intervention and nonviolent communication in schools is widely recognized. However, the implementation of such solutions has not been adequately applied in South Africa. Despite clear frameworks and disciplinary guidelines as outlined in the South African Schools Act, Act 84 of 1996, and Notice 776 in the Government Gazette of 15 May 1998, very few programs have been implemented to effectively deal with conflict. The opportunity to address conflict resolution within the curriculum of life orientation has not been effected. An approach to disciplinary problems in schools is not as simple as it may seem. Most of these problems take place in the classroom or on the school grounds. Learners bicker, threaten, tease, and harass or bully one another. In addition, truancy and late coming are taking on epidemic proportions. Teachers simply do not have the necessary skills to effectively resolve conflict within a school environment because they do not receive the necessary training. Dealing with this type of conflict requires a specialized skill, beyond that of merely a booklet issued by the Department of Basic Education, explaining to teachers how they should resolve conflict within the school environment. Training of teachers on how to deal with conflict is one of the most underemphasized aspects of teacher training. Teachers still focus on controlling and managing learner behavior by leaning towards punishment and sanctions to resolve conflicts. This does not empower learners. Instead, it teaches them to depend on authority figures to resolve conflict. Encouraging learners to be joint architects in matters affecting them promotes feelings of control and autonomy. This is a turning point in thinking about this matter. This can be achieved through the alternative approach of implementing well-structured programs in which teachers and learners are taught the skills and techniques to deal with conflict. It is an effective approach, and it can be achieved by means of mediation, where well-trained and experienced mediators and professionals who deal with conflict resolution are involved. Peer mediation and conflict resolution training for learners will provide them with the skills that allow them to mediate disputes between fellow learners, and integrating effective conflict resolution into schools encourages learners to apply these skills when it matters most. Learner-centered programs train learners to be peacemakers who work with their peers to help resolve conflicts at school. Mediation is an essential component of human interaction, which can be better understood by considering the history of it as it evolved over centuries around various parts of the world. From biblical Israel, the Middle East and China, to this day, the technique has been used to settle disagreements between human beings. The Chinese philosopher Confucius, who lived from 551 before Christ to 479 before Christ, advised that ethical reconciliation is the best solution to conflicts. He also believed that respect for one another trumps the superiority of law and its associated conflicts. Owing to this influence on Chinese culture, mediation became the leading way to settle the disputes in China for thousands of years. In the Western world, mediation also has a long history, originating in the United States. Initially, it was used in labor disputes. However, in the 1960s and 1970s, it gained increasing interest in many other areas, especially in solving family and interpersonal conflicts, as well as conflicts with the community. From there, it spread to other areas over the following decades. The phenomenon of mediation is difficult to define because it is diverse. Mediation has many angles, and there are many perspectives and perceptions of the process, which manifests itself in more than one model. A coherent theoretical basis still has to be developed. But I do have the explanations which will define the core of the process. Mediation is a process to resolve conflicts between two or more people who are unable to solve their disagreement or conflict independently. The process relies on an impartial third party, the mediator, to help individuals use communication, negotiation, and problem-solving skills to resolve the differences between the parties and to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. Mediation is also described as a problem-solving intervention used to create solutions to a variety of disputes and conflicts. It can be used wherever there is a dispute. It is included in alternative dispute resolution, a continuum of problem-solving methods as one of the options. Mediation can also be viewed as an in-depth approach to a problem in which all the parties involved have the opportunity to share opinions and feelings in a way that they are respected and accepted. The solutions to the conflict should be favorable for all involved. In legal terms, mediation is a structured way of resolving a dispute with the help of a neutral third party who cannot issue a binding decision, but helps his clients to reach an agreement that resolves the conflict and redefines mutual rights and obligations, especially in terms of future cooperation. A less formal approach defines mediation as a way in which participants can defend and enforce their differing interests through someone else helping them to cooperate in finding a mutually beneficial path. Mediation is also considered a voluntary process of solving controversial issues whereby participants, with the support and help of a third party, achieve an agreeable solution. And now, in its simplest form, and this is the one that you may remember, mediation is interactive communication between conflicting parties facilitated by a third party, the mediator, to reach an agreement on how to deal with specific unresolved issues if not settled. The mediator acts as a catalyst, supporting the process of decision-making to reach an outcome that will be acceptable to the parties involved. It is thus evident the process focuses primarily on the parties' needs and interests. The mediator uses various techniques to guide the process in the right direction and help the parties to find an optimal solution. Effective communication with no room for misunderstandings or assumptions is critical. The mediator's sole interest is to help the parties reach a settlement. For this reason, it is vital that the mediator remains neutral and impartial during the process. How the mediator conducts mediation is as important as the outcome, which must be highly credible. As a form of alternative dispute resolution, mediation applies to disputes in many areas, such as the commercial, legal, and diplomatic worlds, the workplace, community, family matters, and also, very important, educational institutions. This is what this one is about. Owing to its overall utilitarian value and the growing awareness of its benefits, mediation is increasingly relevant and essential in today's society. What I'm now showing you here are the features of mediation, and this is from the definitions, derived from the definitions. And from the definitions, it is clear mediation has some basic features. It's an approach to resolve conflict. It is a structured process. There is participation in conversation. There's managed negotiation, problem-solving intervention, a neutral third party, a solution for both sides, equivalence, respect, and cooperation. The principles of effective mediation are voluntariness, confidentiality, independency, empowerment, uniqueness, neutrality and impartiality of the mediator, equality and cooperation of the parties. The mediation process must be conducted in a manner that promotes diligence, timelines, safety, mindfulness of the participants, participation, procedural fairness, party competency, mutual respect among the parties. Mediation in a school context. Now we're getting nearer to the real thing. As in any organization where large groups of people are forced to work together, face one another daily, and learn to know one another, a school consists of people of different ages, responsibilities, and backgrounds. It is a complex, sometimes difficult setup where the actions of individuals are determined or influenced by other individuals. Differences in talents and abilities and competition as part of the educational process add heavily to the complexity of relationships in a school. It is obvious that from such an interactive conglomerate of people and interpersonal relationships, mischief, tension, conflict, confrontation, abuse, violence, bullying, victimization, peer cruelty, racism, sexism, exclusion, minor misconduct, as well as serious misconduct will evolve. Schools are often seen as a microcosm of the larger community. Bigger issues such as race, class, and religion often lead to intense, long-term conflicts, which can force the school into a downward spiral of conflict. the following statement, in South Africa, these issues are a growing crisis in the school system. What I'm about to say in the next paragraph is something that many people don't realize or understand. Even teachers do not. The fact is, in a school, each individual is part of a whole, a totality. And this totality is one big living organism. Please remember that. For this organism to maintain itself and to be successful in its mission, there are certain prerequisites and unavoidable realities. It is within the context of these prerequisites and realities that mediation could become a meaningful instrument to contribute to an optimally functional educational institution where curriculum delivery will be smooth and effective. Excuse me. Peer mediation is a form of conflict resolution in which trained learners help their peers work together to resolve everyday disputes. It seems to be the most effective approach to integrating the practice of conflict resolution into schools. By helping learners resolve and learn from interpersonal disputes, peer mediation programs also advance the educational missions of the school in which they operate. Peer mediation as part of conflict resolution programs in schools first emerged in the United States in the early 1970s. It developed momentum in the 1980s and has since become popular in schools all over the world. A Harvard study estimated that over 8,000 such programs are implemented across the United States, and the approach has continued to grow in popularity because of its success in resolving conflicts between learners. Schools report that the use of peer mediation has reduced behavioral problems and suspension rates. My question is, why can't this not happen in South Africa? Learners start to rely on their peers from an early age for social and emotional support. From primary school onwards, they share similar experiences and interests. As they become more independent, peers will play a greater role in their lives. As school and other activities take them away from home, they will spend more time with peers than they do with their parents and siblings. Close friendships will develop from these interactions to the extent that they may welcome the opportunity to function independently from parents and teachers because they feel that fellow learners have better perspective of their views and problems. Adolescents place primary importance on peer status during their high school years, and this paper is focused on them. The influence of peer pressure increases during adolescence. At this stage of their lives, they are easy to influence because they are not yet stable in their beliefs and are exposed to experiences they never had before. This inexperience and negative peer pressure carry unlimited potential for conflict. I want to repeat this sentence. This inexperience, a lack of experience of matters to which they are exposed, influences, and negative peer pressure carry unlimited potential for conflict. Many conflicts in this period are related to relationships. Some conflicts involve learners who do not wish to appear inferior to surrounding classmates. And while negative peer pressure can result in an increase in incidences of conflicts and its complexity, positive peer pressure can have the opposite effect. Strong peer relationships create the opportunity to develop peer mediation programs. With the commitment of teachers, parents, and members of the community, such programs can serve as valuable resources for teaching learners healthy conflict resolution skills. It can develop a school climate in which positive peer influence can become a group dynamic in which behaviors are healthy and socially acceptable. When learners adopt the same positive behavior, they will also learn good habits from one another. Every school can have a group of learners who form part of a panel for all learners to approach where needed. The concept of hierarchical learner systems in schools is outdated, and more people-centered approaches are needed to resolve issues. A top-down, power-based system to solve the conflict in schools is not acceptable anymore. Interventions should move away from the authority to control learners, but rather equip them with the skills to take greater responsibility for resolving their own conflicts. This approach is not about removing power and control from teachers. It is believing in the youth and their ability to resolve their own conflicts. Any school can take the initiative to convince and involve the relevant stakeholders in formulating a policy on peer mediation. This may include teachers, the school governing body, parents in general, and learners. Such a policy will contain definitions, aims, guidelines, amongst others, to make provision for programs, practices, and procedures to be followed in specific situations and circumstances. The policy must include instructions for the training of peer mediators. It should also make provision for planning, organization, monitoring, feedback, control, and management. And like any other policy, it should be revised and adjusted from time to time. To succeed, the policy must be based on a whole school approach, which means that everyone in the school community must invest time and effort in the composition and implementation of the policy. The mediation program needs to be integrated in the school's policies on behavior, management, and pastoral care to offer a consistent model of ways of dealing with conflict effectively and constructively. The school must be seen as a community that will not tolerate unacceptable behavior. Once completed, the policy can be accepted and approved by the school governing body and then be included in the Code of Conduct for learners. Ladies and gentlemen, the slide that you see here is sort of extremely, it's very, very important. Section A of the South African Schools Act, which deals with a code of conduct for learners, contains some basic principles of restorative justice, which pave the way for a formal peer mediation procedure in a school's disciplinary system. And Notice 776 in the Government Gazette of 15 May 1998 provides guidelines for the consideration to adopt a code of conduct for learners, which reflects the spirit of restorative justice and is a compass for peer mediation. Mediation programs should also be aligned with the school's vision and mission statements. The school governing body may establish a subcommittee to oversee the program for peer mediation. A teacher or a school counselor, special staff, and even a community volunteer who has training in mediation skills may serve as a program coordinator. And this coordinator will conduct training for peer mediators, keep the learners and staff informed about the sessions, schedule and supervise mediation sessions, conduct debriefing, follow up with disputants, schedule meetings with peer mediators, review difficult situations, give additional training, keep record of sessions, and evaluate the program's impact and success. Implementing a peer mediation program, enough interpersonal conflict to warrant initiating the program is necessary. Mediators must have the opportunity to mediate cases, otherwise the benefits of the programs will not realize. The school must determine what constitutes enough conflict. If the program does not mediate at least one case per week, it may collapse. For peer mediation to succeed, teachers, especially those in senior positions, must work proactively to overcome attitudinal and structural resistance within their schools. In particular, teachers in charge of discipline must make referrals and support learners' mediation efforts. As already mentioned, the peer mediator to manage all aspects of the program is a necessity. The more resources the school-based adult has in terms of skills, commitment, and time during the school day, the more successful the program is likely to be. Now, what you see there are 10 questions which must be answered to ensure the success of the program. The first one, how will the mediation program be funded? Long-term as well as short-term financial needs must be considered. Initial and ongoing costs will include remuneration, training, and stationery expenses. Sources of funding include school budgets as well as donations from private institutions. And the funding will be managed by the Finance Committee, who reports to the SGB. Which learners and staff could be trained? The trainees should be a diverse group that represents a cross-section of the school community. Ethnicity, race, religion, socioeconomics, academics, age, gender, etc. must be considered. Include a key faculty who can help build support among their peers, and then consider recommendations from learners and staff. Who will conduct the peer mediation? Only trainers who have experience both as mediators and trainers should be used. People with experience, people who are trained as accredited mediators will be the right one, the right people. When will the training be scheduled? It must minimize the tuition time which learners will miss. Training times will include school hours, afternoons, evenings, weekends, holidays, or a combination. Which issues will be mediated? Peer mediation programs will not mediate issues which are classified as serious misconduct. At the start, it will mediate minor transgressions. But serious misconduct is out, such as possession of dangerous objects, substance abuse, bullying, assault, etc. A transgression, this is important to remember, a transgression which falls within the definition of serious misconduct will be dealt with by means of a disciplinary hearing by the school governing body, where legal procedures will be followed. But how to deal with the outcome of a disciplinary hearing could be mediated if circumstances allow it. Where will mediation sessions be held? In a private space, a venue of their own, away from the disciplinary office, nearer to the coordinator's office. When will this be held? Whenever a dispute is referred, during specific time slots, and also after school. The confidentiality policy aspect of the policy is very important. Preserving the confidentiality of what transpires during mediation is essential to the success of the program. Program records must be secured. How will the whole school be informed about mediation? The number of referrals received and consequently the impact the program will have upon the school is directly related to the level of understanding the school community has about mediation. Methods to inform teachers and learners will include demonstration, role plays at school assemblies, seminars, posters, articles in school newspapers, and in-service workshops for staff, amongst others. What kind of follow-up training and support will be provided for the mediators? Peer mediators should meet on a regular basis in order to share experiences, improve their skills, coordinate outreach efforts, and address internal disciplinary issues. The personal attributes of a peer mediator, from everything that we've read up to now and heard up to now, the following is very important. Honesty, sincerity, intelligence, common sense, creativity, flexibility, empathy, self-respect, self-discipline, responsibility, bias awareness, patience, respectfulness, persistence, and self-reflection. Quite a lot, but it's possible. Skills required for peer mediation, quite a range of it. Active listening skills. This may be difficult for young learners who are still developing their skills and have to listen without being judgmental. Questioning and clarifying skills. Peer mediators must make sure they and all those involved understand the situation. Establishing the facts may be less important than setting out the points of view of those involved. They must also make sure that both sides understand the other's opinions. Emotional intelligence. Peer mediators must understand what is going on under the surface. Empathy, in particular, will enable them to put themselves in the place of both participants and help those involved to do the same. Learners will not be able to master this skill immediately. Fairness and justice. A peer mediator must acknowledge points made by both parties and spend equal time with each person on their issues. It is a mediator's obligation to remain neutral and impartial throughout the process. Communication. The distinction must be made between verbal and non-verbal negotiation skills. Verbal communication skills must enable the mediator to ensure everybody present has a clear understanding of what is conveyed. Semantics and choice of words are very important components in any communication. The mediator will therefore sometimes intervene and reiterate, using synonyms and antonyms for what the parties have said to one another. He will also summarize what was said and specifically be able to paraphrase and describe emotions in unemotive language and guide the participants to understand one another correctly and to see the situation as it is. Non-verbal communication includes attitudes, body language, and that which is not said. Social skills such as, and negotiation skills, thinking skills, and anger management are also very important. Well-developed communication skills will enable the mediator to do a proper problem analysis and to identify common interests. Just a moment. Peer mediation training. Since peer mediators are role models for other learners, it is important to choose them carefully. Mediators can be selected by their classmates after engaging in a discussion on the good qualities of a peer mediator. Self-referrals, as well as those made by teachers, counselors, and other staff will be considered. A teacher or school counselor who has training in mediation skills will serve as a program coordinator. The training program must include activities which emphasize certain personal attributes and specific skills as mentioned in 11 and 12. The activity should include lecturing, discussions, and role play. As a starting point, learners need training in foundational conflict resolution skills and mediation. This can be done in 2 stages. After the training stage, they are introduced to the mediation process before nominating themselves or others for additional training. Most of the training courses in support of the development of peer mediation in schools and peer mediation training are delivered via circle time with a mix of didactic and experiential exercises. Circle time is when learners gather in a circle to participate in a guided discussion or group activity. Learners are given a basic understanding of conflict and its resolution and participate in a number of activities designed to develop cooperation and communication within the group. Additional training provides an opportunity for peer mediators to bond as a group and rehearse their skills. The courses include what is referred to as the iceberg principle. This emphasizes a problem-solving approach to conflict, underpinned by skills in affirmation, communication, and cooperation. Training activities in conflict resolution skills and peer mediation emphasize one or a multiple of skills shown in this figure. A number of games and challenges are included to develop cooperation and communication in the group. Communication activities pay particular attention to the development of key mediation skills, such as listening and reflecting back, and using language that prevents the escalation of conflict, such as ensuring that put-downs are not used by disputants. The courses emphasize the importance of developing affirmation within the group. Self-respect, mutual respect, and respect for others is seen as the bedrock of healthy relationships and as a skill that can be learned. The first step in developing affirmation is to build a sense of personal identity that is both accurate and positive. The second step for many learners is overcoming the embarrassment of saying and recognizing positive things about themselves and others. Learners who have experienced little praise and warmth can find this difficult. Affirmation, therefore, needs to be given and taken genuinely. An example of an affirmation activity is the game called Sleeping Hedgehog, where a learner has to guess who is hiding under a blanket from the affirmative things which are said about them. The game rounds, where learners talk in turn about a common theme or question, also creates valuable opportunities for learners to hear about the feelings of others and develop reflexivity about the welfare of the group. It is essential that teachers are included in the training. Although peer mediators take a large degree of responsibility for running their own mediation, teachers must act as gatekeepers to oversee the smooth running of the program. We distinguish 2 types of mediation, facilitative and evaluative. In evaluative mediation, the mediator is at some point may express a view to the parties about strengths and weaknesses of their cases. Excuse me, just a moment. In facilitative mediation, a neutral third party, a mediator, assists the parties to settle their disputes. It is a voluntary process of managed negotiation where the parties negotiate their own deal, but it has a timetable, a structure, and dynamics with simple negotiation, which simple negotiation lacks. In secondary schools, conflict resolution programs tend to take the form of elective courses or clubs. In curriculum-based programs, conflict resolution is taught in the classroom. It can be a specific unit incorporated in other subjects, such as languages or life orientation. In a school-wide program, learners representing various grades and groups are chosen to participate in training to become peer mediators. The mediations are scheduled and conducted in a designated area with minimal adult supervision. A classroom model often involves learners in one or more grades who have been trained in conflict resolution skills. In addition, several learners are selected to receive additional peer mediation training. These learners serve as peer mediators in their own classes at their grade level or with younger learners. In a whole class model, every learner in a classroom is trained in peer mediation skills. When two learners cannot decide on a reasonable solution to a problem, other learners assist by facilitating mediation at the peace table located in the classroom. A mediation session can occur formally or informally, depending on the type of mediation required. In formal mediation, a peer mediator or a team of two mediators meet at a scheduled time and place with the disputants. The sessions vary in length, depending on the nature of the conflict. If a dispute occurs in the hall, the cafeteria, or on the playground, peer mediators may engage in informal mediation. During such times, mediators are available and identified by armbands, vests, or badges. When an altercation occurs, learners can seek a peer mediator to facilitate the solution to the problem. And of course, mediation can also be a combination of these types, depending on the needs of a particular situation. What I'm going to do now is just to give you a framework of the classic mediation process and procedures. All mediation is underpinned by offering disputants the opportunity to reach a mutually satisfying outcome, facilitated by neutral third parties. In schools, this process follows the 4 distinct stages of mediation. And these are setting the scene, explaining the process and agreeing to the ground rules, hearing both sides of the story, with emphasis on how each party is feeling, generating possible solutions to the dispute, and try to reach an agreement. Although every mediation process will be slightly different, there are a number of basic steps on these stages which must be considered. The first is the parties agree to mediate. They must commit themselves to the process. Nobody is forced into the situation. There must be a mutual agreement to mediate. The mediator can have separate meetings with the parties to reach such an agreement. The parties may put their issues in writing and present them to the mediator prior to the mediation meeting. Before the start of the process, the mediator will attend to logistical matters such as seating arrangement and maybe the provision of water. At the start, the mediator will introduce him or herself, welcome the disputants, and ask each disputant their name and grade level. The mediator will then give a definition of mediation, describe the process, outline the nature and objectives of the process, and the role of the mediator will then be explained. The mediator must be objective, neutral, impartial, and non-judgmental, which is not always easy. As no sides are taken, this is not the role of a judge. He is not a judge because he does not take sides. The mediator, and please remember this one, this last word on the slide. The mediator is little more than a catalyst. To ensure the success of the proceedings, the parties need to agree to some ground rules, and these will include doing their best to solve the problem, telling the truth, exercising self-control, treating one another with respect, being polite, no put-downs or threats, listening to one another without interrupting, cooperating to find a solution, signing a written agreement, honoring the agreement, keeping the mediation confidential. The mediator defines a problem by asking and listening to each learner's version of the events. He listens to and reflects on the content and feelings expressed by both parties. It will be helpful if the mediator makes a summary of the main points of the conflict in a neutral way, so that both parties agree upon its inclusion in an agenda for discussion. At this stage, the mediator names the emotions of the participants are feeling, and as an indication that they are recognized and understood. The mediator shows understanding of each learner's perspective through non-verbal reactions and comments. He then verifies the stories by paraphrasing what is said. He asks the disputants to speak directly to each other as they discuss their issues, feelings, needs, and hopes. The mediator keeps their focus on the issues on the table for discussion. He will ask clarifying questions and summarizes the concerns and issues. At this stage, at a certain stage, the disputants should be at the point where they begin to understand each other's point of view and be ready to resolve a shared problem. Guide them to brainstorm ways to solve the problem. And then from here on, they will look for areas of agreement and present possible solutions. This disputants together decide what will be the best option. And then the mediator must clarify the first step that needs to be taken. Who will do what and when? And then the solution should be recorded as a written agreement. Decide on a consequence should either party not follow through and add it to the agreement. And then both learners must sign the agreement and they congratulate them and let them shake hands. Now, as I've already mentioned in point number 13, mediation can be a combination of different types of mediation depending on the needs of a particular situation. To understand the impact of peer mediation and the meaning of it, it is important to understand that there are other approaches with which to address conflicts in schools, which can be used. The first is a behaviorist intervention. Behaviorism focuses on the idea that all behaviors are learned through interaction with the environment. The theory states that behaviors are learned from the environment and that innate or inherited factors have very little influence on behavior. Behaviorism is important for teachers because it impacts on how learners react and behave in the classroom, and suggests that teachers can directly influence how their learners behave. It also helps teachers understand that learners' home environments and lifestyles can influence their behavior. This will help them see it objectively and work to assist with improvement. The next one is communication and regulation. There seems to be a relationship between social relations, principles of communication, and the regulation of opportunities for thinking and acting. This view presents two contrasting examples of principles of communication used by teachers, underpinned by different principles of power and control. The first example, assertive discipline, posits the teacher with authority in arbitrating all conflict. This approach views conflict as disruptive to education and attempts to empower teachers with the means to manage order more efficiently. The second example, dialogic approaches to communication, posits a more equal relationship between parties in the exploration of alternative resolutions to a conflict. Learners must be taught social skills in the resolution of both inter-learner and teacher-learner conflicts. This type of two-way communication is more dialogue-centered in contrast to assertive discipline. Curriculum. Conflict resolution may form the content of one or a series of lessons. Conflict resolution skills are supported by a thorough knowledge of the dynamics of conflict and potential strategies for its resolution. Principles of non-violence may be explored via constructive themes, which may include topics such as media literacy, so that the education about violence provided by television and cinema can be reframed more accurately. Academic education should include learning to deal with controversies. Not only does this increase learners' motivation to learn, it also develops critical thinking skills to develop a problem-solving approach to conflict. I now have a problem here. Okay, there we are. Citizenship. In the United Kingdom, citizenship is a national curriculum subject, mandatory for all secondary schools. It aims to endorse the political values of pluralism and democracy. The guidance expects teachers to teach learners in a common set of values: truth, honesty, trust, and a sense of duty. It explicitly recommends that conflict resolution skills be taught. Pastoral care. Pastoral care in the United Kingdom schools is provided by both the delivery of personal health and social education as a discrete subject and the breaking down of large schools into smaller family groups. Pastoral care can be a tool for learner empowerment and support. While providing valuable moral support to learners, teachers in secondary schools can act as buffers between pupils' social and emotional needs and other functions of the school. Pastoral care can also address the pieces of violence and bullying. Circle time and peer support training, discussed separately in this paper, are also forms of pastoral care. Whole school cultural approaches. To address unacceptable behavior effectively, a whole school approach is required, because the school must be seen as a consistent community that will not tolerate bad behavior. Schools need to examine the relationship between unacceptable behavior and their own organization, policies of discipline, and teaching styles, as individual intervention strategies by themselves tend to have a limited impact. An effective whole school approach requires a huge investment of time and effort from everyone in the school community. There seems to be evidence of a clear reduction in unacceptable behaviour where there is sufficient commitment to a whole school approach. The wider community should also be involved because the school needs its ideas and resources to promote the principles of the whole school approach. The initiative will also need regular monitoring, evaluation, and modification. An ideal system of conflict resolution in schools which adopts a whole school cultural approach is shown in the figure. The spatial proportioning of each level in the diagram is meant to indicate the relative frequency of the corresponding approach to conflict resolution. For example, arbitration of conflicts should occur least. The model integrates a number of interventions already described, and it also includes, and this is very important, it includes peer mediation combined with the principles of restorative justice. The concept of restorative justice is an approach to justice aimed to bring the involved parties and others affected by harm, victims, offenders, families concerned, and community members, to a dispute deliberation meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to collectively identify the harm, needs, and obligations, as well as accepting responsibilities, making restitution, taking measures to prevent the recurrence of the incident, and promoting reconciliation. This makes restorative justice a basis for any approach to resolve conflict resolution. Restorative justice and peer mediation are interwoven, in the sense that mediation can be seen as an outcome of restorative justice because it is based on the principles and follows the procedures of the latter. Restorative justice is a theory of justice that emphasizes meaningful deliberation in which the focus is on agreement and reconciliation rather than punishment. It works to resolve conflict and repair harm. As such, it is correctional, supportive, and healing, a sign of hope and direction for the future. The definition is applicable in all spheres and forms of human interaction. In a school system, the principles of restorative justice can form the basis for all types of peer mediation. And from this angle, peer mediation can develop into a complementary approach in the educational process. What follows now are 5 ideas to implement peer mediation based on restorative practices in schools. The first one is mindfulness. This is the ability to be fully present and aware of where one is and what one is doing. It allows learners to become more self-aware of classmates and teachers. It increases focus and reduces stress and anxiety. Practicing mindfulness involves sitting quietly for a few minutes and focusing on one's breathing. It can be guided with words, assisted with calming music, or be done in complete silence. Mindfulness will create an atmosphere of mutual respect and concern, where learners can feel that they are at liberty to speak freely and openly as equals. It is in such an atmosphere that learners can discuss and mediate offenses decide how to repair harm, and to resolve conflict. In these circumstances, learners will be enabled to understand why conflict occurs. When communication has broken down for reasons such as people not listening to one another, people feeling bad about themselves, a lack of cooperation amongst one another, not accepting one another, and problems seeming unsurmountable. They will then also learn to understand that conflict resolution needs to rest on a base of values, as illustrated in the iceberg principle: affirmation, communication, cooperation, and problem solving. Conflict is an essential and unavoidable human phenomenon. It is normal and can be a positive force for personal growth. Learners can be taught that conflict is natural, necessary, and educational. They will then understand that conflict is part of life and they must learn how to handle it. You can read for yourself what Mahatma Gandhi said about it. Circle time is a way to bring restorative practices into the classroom to establish a supportive community. The way the process is conducted makes the circle a symbol of community and conveys core values such as equality, safety, trust, responsibility, justice, and democracy. Circles help to build listening and speaking skills, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship skills. During circle time, learners sit in a circle as a group and discuss issues of importance or reflect on their feelings. Equality is emphasized by all learners, and the teachers sitting on the same level, away from their desks and taking turns to talk. Circle time can be used to share what happened during a person's day, resolve conflict or academic conversations. In this way, learners will engage in active listening and tune into feelings behind what is being said. They can engage in activities such as games, stories, role play, and creating affirmation posters. Circle time can be used to deliver a program to develop communication skills and foster trust and cooperation within a group. It is an ideal format for managing the social dynamics of a classroom and developing a cooperative group. One of the strengths of circle time is how it develops group reflexivity to tasks and well-being of members of a class. This is done by making the group responsible for its own success and cohesion, and it will improve the group's social interaction. It can also be extended to conferencing when a meeting of a larger group of parties concerned is convened to resolve a matter. Parents and other people can be involved if it is appropriate. With larger numbers, there will be a need for a more formal structure so that everybody can contribute in an orderly fashion. Affective statements or feelings are personal expressions of feelings as a response to someone else's actions. With affective statements, one states one's feelings, the reason for the feelings, and what is needed to feel better. It can be used between teachers and learners, peer-to-peer, and especially in peer mediation and mentoring. It is important for teachers to model using the statements with their learners, so learners witness positive examples of expressing feelings and making requests. In this way, learners will master communication skills so that they can both share and listen to diverse opinions. They should also learn to accommodate differences of opinion and opposing standpoints with open-mindedness and without prejudice or animosity. Conceding dissenting ideas should be part of the learning process. Effective statements help to build social awareness, relationship skills, and nurture responsible decision-making. Role play with learners can be used to give feedback to classmates respectfully and to receive feedback if they are the ones responsible for hurting someone else's feelings. The collaborative class agreements involves learners in making rules for a class. When learners are given the opportunity to contribute to the rules that will govern their class, they develop a sense of ownership for their classroom. Teachers and learners can collaborate to make rules that will create a secure classroom environment. Through debating, even arguing, and eventually through mediation, learners can learn and develop their own negotiating skills. The problem-solving anchor chart refers to scenarios where learners require the help of a teacher and scenarios where learners can try to problem solve independently. One can use the phrase big deal and no big deal. Together, the teacher and the learners discuss things that could happen in the school that day that would be a big deal. For example, fighting, inflicting injuries, stealing, and the like. In the event of any of these occurring, the learners must report the incident to the teacher immediately. They also discuss what could happen during the school day that would be considered no big deal, such as taking someone's spot, stepping on someone's foot, and wanting something someone else has. These infringements, which learners must be able to distinguish between them, whether they were innocent or intentionally antagonizing, and then be equipped to deal with incidents appropriately. After categorizing the incidents, they discuss possible solutions to the problem. If it is a big deal, the solution always is to tell the teacher or an adult. If it is no big deal, the solutions might be to use the feeling script, finding another spot item, waiting or ignoring if it need be. The solutions are based on what the class and the community feel is an appropriate solution to the problem. The anchor card stays up all year and can be amended as needed. What follows now, and I'm going through this one rather quickly, these are the benefits of peer mediation. I'm not going to read all of it. I will just emphasize certain aspects of it. Peer mediation resolves learner conflicts. The most fundamental benefit of peer mediation is that it effectively resolves learner conflicts. Almost 90% of all mediation sessions result in an agreement that satisfies not only the parties, but teachers and parents as well. It teaches learners essential life skills. This is very important. Just as reading and writing are essential skills for leading a productive life, so too are conflict resolution skills. Young people need to be able to communicate effectively, appreciate the consequences of their actions, generate and evaluate alternative solutions to problems, and to coexist with people with whom they disagree. Peer mediation builds learners' conflict resolution skills through real-life practice. In the mediation process, learners are given the responsibility and tools to work out problems without parental or teacher supervision, skills which they can use throughout their lives. All skills require practice to master, and peer mediation enables learners to develop their conflict resolution skills where it matters most, in real-life conflicts. Number 4, In peer mediation, each participant has the choice to control the situation. Peer mediation motivates learners to talk things out rather than to fight things out. Learners learn from one another, learn from other learners who are mediators or who have been involved in parties that mediation works. Number 5, it deepens the educational impact of the school. Peer mediation uses an essentially extracurricular distraction, interpersonal conflict, as a teaching tool, while mediators model pro-social methods of resolving conflicts. Learner parties practice resolving their differences by using criteria of fairness and mutual benefit rather than brutal strength and intimidation. Number 6, peer mediation empowers learners. Just as teachers do not teach learners algebra by solving problems for them, adults don't teach young people to resolve conflicts by doing so for them. Peer mediation teaches learners the skills and then encourages them to resolve their own conflicts in a supervised setting. Number 7, it increases self-esteem. Parties participate in a process that enables them to take charge of their lives and leave them feeling successful rather than diminished. When a mediation session is successful, every person involved feels that an honorable thing was done. It gives learners greater insight. Learners gain many important insights from their involvement in peer mediation. Most significantly, learners learn that many conflicts cannot be reduced to right versus wrong, us versus them scenarios, but are instead the result of misperception, misunderstanding, and legitimately differing needs. Peer mediation also helps learners appreciate diversity. It expects the best from learners. Many school structures assume that learners are incapable of acting responsibly. In contrast, the mediation process provides a forum in which young people can rise to their highest potential. It engages all learners, even those considered at risk. Even learners who have chronic behavioral problems come to appreciate mediation. It provides them with a face-saving way to settle their disputes, and many of these same learners excel when they are trained as mediators. Peer mediation creates more time for learning. One school reported a 50% decrease in office referrals after operating a peer mediation program for 1 year. With learners resolving their conflicts by mediation, teachers spend less of their valuable time disciplining learners and more of it teaching them. It is also preventative. It works in numerous ways to effectively prevent violent conflict. Outreach efforts encourage learners to come to mediation soon after conflicts develop and before they escalate. Even after a conflict has erupted, mediation can prevent it from leading to more or greater conflicts. Most large group disputes can be prevented if the core of interpersonal conflicts is resolved in a timely manner. It improves the school climate. Peer mediation seems to have a positive impact upon school climate. The program fosters feelings of belonging, ownership, and control over school life. It decreases the tension that results from unresolved and escalating conflicts. Peer mediation suits both the psychosocial needs of learners and the professional needs of teachers. Young people require an ever-increasing degree of autonomy and control over their lives. At the same time, their immaturity and lack of experience can lead them to make mistakes, behave irresponsibly, and hurt one another. Educators must therefore find a balance between autonomy and supervision. Peer mediation accommodates these competing needs by providing a structure within which learners are free to make their own choices. It also offers a gender balancing method of conflict resolutions to school. Recent research suggests that males and females conduct their lives by a different moral center. Males seem to decide what is morally appropriate in reference to what has been called fairness, abstract concepts of rights, rules, and laws. Women appear to use a standard moral based upon caring, one's relationship with and responsibility to others. Whereas men might explain that stealing is wrong because people have a right to their possessions, women might explain that stealing is wrong because it harms the other person. As in all things, peer mediation also has its limitations. Bully and victim problems cannot be addressed using this approach if one of the parties is not willing to participate in the process. Quite commonly, the bully is not willing to participate. Peer mediation is not appropriate for cases of serious misconduct as stipulated in the Schools Act. Schools must have alternative processes and procedures to deal with such cases, which should be outlined in the Code of Conduct for Learners. It is difficult to conduct if there is an extreme imbalance of power. This can greatly disadvantage the target when attempting to negotiate a position. The mediator may feel unable to be neutral when the bullying is unfair and is causing great distress. Well-developed skills are needed, such as active listening, facilitating constructive interactions, and neutral refraining from information on the part of the mediator. These may not always be available in a school. In conclusion, mediation programs can promote a change in attitude towards conflict as learners improve their communication skills, develop leadership skills, learn to tolerate alternative points of view, and realize they can respond in a more constructive way to frustrating circumstances. The strategies and skills learned become a process that defines values and leads to a school-wide growth. Peer mediation programs can develop a positive climate in a school. They are also an alternative to traditional disciplinary practices. But most importantly, learners will learn conflict resolution and problem-solving skills that they may carry with them for life. The greatest value of mediation lies in its potential not only to find solutions to people's problems, but to change people themselves for the better in the very midst of conflict. And this statement lies at the heart of education, and as such, given the tremendous challenges faced by schools and the proven value peer mediation brings to this landscape, the role mediation can play in schools appears definitive. I thank you. I'm finished.
Thank you very much, Sas. Is there any questions from the floor? Anybody, any comments?
Yeah, Oh,
Fine, go first, it's fine.
you can speak, Heidi. I mean, I will follow.
I've already asked it, and social justice has answered it. So I just wonder, and then following that, I was just wondering if learner, okay, so social justice said mediation. I'm not sure if I understood exactly. If there's a situation where the conflict is like criminal and it goes to court or something like that, and learners refuse to mediate or refuse to participate in, like, where someone is a mediator, are they, how does that work? Have like higher say, force them to go for mediation, or can they just not go?
I'm sorry.
Voluntary, if it's voluntary.
I must first say, I find it very difficult to follow you. You break down a little. Can you just repeat your question?
Okay. If, let's say, it's a criminal, like someone broke someone's arm, or it's very, very serious, and there's a court case. In the beginning, I was just wondering, in the beginning, maybe it's just a stupid question, but in the beginning, one of the slides, it said that mediation is voluntary. Okay. So you may say no, but if a court says, orders it, can you still say no?
No, no, mediation is voluntary. Even if, I mean, I just recently had a case, but that was a civil matter at the magistrate's office, where the parties were requested by the magistrate to go for mediation. And when they came there, the one said, no, I don't want to mediate. I want to follow the legal process. So I said, okay, then we stop the meeting. It remains voluntary. But okay, in what you refer here to, say somebody is in a court case because he assaulted someone with serious, injuring that person in a very serious way, breaking an arm or whatever, that the legal process must then be completed. You cannot mediate something which is criminal.
Okay.
You cannot mediate that. But what you can do is, when the matter is, the court case is over and the verdict was given, then, say for instance, there was a plea bargaining case. The outcome of the plea bargaining is that there will be punishment. But when all of that is over, there can still be reconciliation. The principles of restorative justice can still be applied.
Okay, so technically, from law perspective, you're not allowed to refuse to talk about. Oh, yeah, you have to either or choose mediation or follow the legal process.
No, if there was, look, let's say for instance, in serious misconduct in a school, you know, assault, theft, vandalism, using drugs, sexual harassment, all of those, they are defined in that bylaws of the South African Schools Act. They are specifically defined what is serious misconduct. And you cannot mediate that. It must go through a disciplinary hearing conducted by a subcommittee of the school governing body. But as I've said, when that is over, when it has been done, then the people may start, they can begin a new leaf. And this is where restorative justice principles can be applied.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Arda, you had something to ask as well. And I see Anna Maria's got her mic off as well, and so is Christo. So, Arda, anything you want to add?
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was a very interesting presentation. Thank you for that. Yeah, it was really, I every now and then I had to think back on a course that I did in the Netherlands on family conferencing, and also the circles that they use in schools and stuff like that. So it was a little bit like, oh yeah, nice. You know, it is so important that these things will be made actually available in schools, because we have to empower the youth and to involve them in finding solutions for themselves. Actually, what do they need? I don't hear that question often enough asked. Actually, what is it that you need? And a lot of kids know the answers. I mean, I'm convinced of that. So my question actually is there any kind of structured program in place already which schools could, for example, purchase? Or is it more like, or does, yeah, I don't know, Sas, whether you know, or perhaps in your spare time you have been developing a course or something like that that you could share with interested schools or something like that? Or is it something that schools have to figure out themselves?
Anna, I must tell you that for South African schools, this is a new thing. In most South African schools, the circumstances are such that you are not going to be able to implement the proposals of this paper easily. It's going to be difficult. But further to answer your question, my answer is actually no. Schools in South Africa haven't made use of this yet. What did happen is, and here I speak from my own experience. When I was still in the profession, I was, for the last 15 years of my career, was at a school where I had to take responsibility for the disciplinary system of the school, which was not an easy task. But do you know what? Through experience, I began to apply the principles of restorative justice and peer mediation, but I didn't know it. I didn't know that this is what I was busy doing. What I presented to you tonight is based on a lot of reading and statistics and information from schools overseas. You have heard me mention in the United States and the United Kingdom. Nowhere did I mention any school in South Africa. The point is, many other teachers also apply the principles of restorative justice and of peer mediation without knowing it. And my point is, if we can develop a structure and train teachers to apply these principles in schools. And let me further say, this document, this paper of mine, this is not final. It must be implemented, and then it must develop further. And the other thing is, you're going to apply this in the school according to the circumstances in that specific school. No two schools are the same. Now, So if we can get to a point where teachers are trained, and this is, let me tell you something, and I'm very unhappy about this. Teachers are trained at universities in South Africa to become teachers, but they are not told anything about the devastating circumstances in schools.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a doctor's training is based on what happens in practice. A lawyer is the same. Lawyers are trained according to what happens in the practice. They study cases. It's the same with an engineer or any other discipline, tertiary discipline. But teachers, they are trained by people, most of them have been in a classroom 15 years ago. Now, what happened in a classroom 15 years ago and what happens there now is as far as the east and from the west. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to say is teachers are not trained according or on the basis of what is happening in schools. Their training is based on philosophy, flights of the imagination, all sorts of visions, which are very beautiful, but it doesn't address the real problem that teachers face the day when they start into the classroom. And that is my point. I feel teachers must be trained at the university to have the emotional intelligence to handle disciplinary problems in schools. That's my point. And I feel this paper is a starting point.
Yeah, one last question. Has this paper been published already? Like in an educational journal?
No.
Now you should consider that. I think it's important. Thank you.
What I've done is I gave it to there's a retired lecturer here from the education department who is a very sensible person. I gave it to her to read, and I had some good comments from her. But I can consider, but I will speak to Anneke and Laurie about this.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question. I don't know, Christo, Anna-Marie, which one of you was first? I'm not sure.
Anneke, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Anna-Marie, we can hear you.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. My system is slow. I am here, I promise.
Okay. Sas, first of all, I want to congratulate you on this wonderful talk. It's been most helpful and very insightful. Now, I'd like to share something with you guys that's just happened in our town of Jeffreys Bay. We've had 2 suicides in a high school in less than 2 years. The sad part is all of this could have been prevented because it's all due to bullying. And there was a social worker and an OT that had introduced mindfulness, and it was rejected. Nobody can say why. And I believe I trained in Australia, as Anneke and Laurie knows, and I'm a holistic practitioner as well as a psychotherapist. And I use mindfulness all the time. Now, this is something that's been implemented all across the world, and yet it is frowned upon at schools, which the research, as Sas has verbalized earlier, has been done where schools actually progress so much more. There's the calmness amongst the children in schools. The level of concentration has improved dramatically. even when I treat my patients here, I see the increase in the children's marks, and their level of concentration has improved with some of these kids from 48 to 76%.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Absolutely. And this is purely through mindfulness. So yes, Sas, I'm very passionate about this topic of yours. And I absolutely love the fact of the hedgehog blanket, because that's, once again, it's another thing, as you said earlier, that affirmations is not a common thing in South Africa. And where the children are absolutely not aware of their strengths and their skills that they can hone in on. And I myself, just like you, have spoken to a lot of the lecturers here at NMMU and asked them, isn't there a way that we can maybe cap the age group of teachers where, when they enter their study phase, you know, most of these kids have just finished school.
Yeah.
And their EQ is just not there. So they are children that have just matriculated. And in the Eastern Cape, a lot of these kids end up doing their practical at the same school as where they grew up in.
Yeah.
Or where they had played sport, rugby, tennis, netball, whatever. And there is a bit of